parallel lines and angle relationships. Perpendicular lines are lines that intersect at right angles, and you will always know a perpendicular line because this box here, that's the symbol, geometric symbol for a right angle. So any lines that form that angle are perpendicular. Parallel lines are two lines in a plane that never intersect or cross, so they will never meet. So M and N, those are parallel because they're never going to cross each other. A line that intersects two or more other lines is called a transversal. So for example, line Q crosses M and N. So line Q is a transversal. The same for line P. Line P crosses M and N, so line P is a transversal. Two lines are cut by a transversal are parallel. These special pairs of angles are congruent. That means they have the same measure. So alternate interior angles, alternate exterior angles, and corresponding angles. It would help if you knew what all those were. So alternate interior. My pen's not working. I'll just abbreviate it like this. Alternate interior are inside the parallel lines. And opposite sides of the transversals. Alternate exterior are outside the parallel lines and they are opposite sides of the transversal. Corresponding angles, I'm sorry about that. They are on the same side of the parallel lines and the same side of the transversal. So in this one, in the figure at the right, line M and N are parallel. Measure of angle 3 is 64. Determine each given angle measure and justify each answer. So the first thing they want to know is if they give you 64, what would be the measure of angle 8? Well, if you notice, those are both to the right of the parallel lines and on top of the transversal P. So if they're on the same side and they're both on top or both on bottom, then those are called corresponding angles. Corresponding angles have the same measure. So the measure of angle 8 equals 64 degrees. And then it says to justify your answer. That means just tell me why you said it was what it was. So these are corresponding. In other words, they just want to know what kind of angle it is. Okay, so now we're looking at measure of angle 3 and measure of angle 10. Now remember, line P is the transversal. So these are inside the parallel lines and they're on opposite sides of the transversal. So that would be inside is interior and opposite is alternate. So these are alternate interior angles, and alternate interior angles have the same measure. So that is 64 degrees also because they are alternate interior angles. Measure of angle 4 compared to measure of angle 3. Okay, if you take angles 3 and 4 and put them together, in other words, add them together, they form a right angle. That means they have to add up to 90 degrees. So measure of angle 3 plus the measure of angle 4 has to equal 90 because they form a right angle. So we know the measure of angle 3 is 64 plus, we don't know measure of angle 4, I'll call it x, equals 90. So you want to say 64 plus what equals 90. So if you subtract 64, you will know your answer. 90 take away 64 is 26 degrees. And the justification is they are right angles. Actually, I should say they form right angles. Forms a right angle when you add them together. Okay, measure of angle 6. So we know that 3 is 64. 6 Okay, this is one that we haven't really talked about yet. It wasn't in our little notes. If you look at this as an x, they are opposite the x from each other. So those are called vertical angles. I like to say that they are across the x. Those are congruent. So 3 and 6 have the same measure because they are vertical. So measure of angle 6 equals 64 degrees, and that is because they are vertical angles.